Why does the United States, the world's largest oil producer, still depend on foreign oil? If the U.S. pumps out over 21 million barrels of petroleum per day, more than enough to meet its domestic needs, why do we continue to import oil from OPEC countries? Why does the U.S. export its own oil while bringing in millions of barrels from nations like Saudi Arabia? This paradox has puzzled many, and in this video, we'll dive deep into the intricate web of American oil production, trade policies, and global economic strategies to understand the complexity of this issue. We first need to look at the scale of U.S. oil production. Despite having only the 11th largest oil reserves, the United States is the biggest oil producer in the world, surpassing well-known oil giants like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran. As of the latest data, the U.S. holds approximately 36.5 billion barrels of oil in its reserves. While this may sound like a massive amount, it pales in comparison to countries like Venezuela, which leads the world with around 300 billion barrels of reserves. Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Iran also possess oil reserves significantly larger than those of the United States. So, how does the U.S. maintain such high levels of oil production? The answer lies in how oil is extracted and the policies governing its use. Unlike countries such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which regulate their oil production to avoid oversupply and price crashes, the U.S. follows a different strategy. OPEC nations carefully manage their production levels to ensure oil prices remain high, as their economies rely heavily on oil sales. If they were to flood the market with oil, prices would plummet, negatively impacting their revenues. This strategic control allows them to sustain their economies, which are largely dependent on petroleum exports. A clear example of this dependency can be seen in Saudi Arabia's economy. If crude oil prices rise, the country's GDP soars. If prices fall, economic downturns follow. However, despite this reliance on high oil prices, OPEC nations have little control over the global oil market. If another oil-producing country like Iran decides to flood the market with cheap oil, it can lead to a price collapse, hurting Saudi Arabia and other oil-dependent economies. To prevent this, Saudi Arabia devised a groundbreaking solution in the 1990s, controlling oil production to maintain stable prices. This move fundamentally changed the dynamics of global oil markets. In contrast, the United States has no interest in keeping oil prices artificially high. As a major consumer of oil, the U.S. benefits from lower prices, which reduce costs for industries and consumers alike. To achieve this, the U.S. aggressively extracts as much oil as possible, relying on technological advancements and improved extraction techniques. This strategy has propelled the U.S. to the top of the oil production rankings. Despite its smaller reserve base, however, despite its current production dominance, the U.S. has not always been an oil powerhouse. A look into history reveals why. The country remains cautious about relying solely on domestic oil. In the early 1900s, oil demand was minimal and the resource was abundant. But the lead-up to World War I dramatically changed the situation. Petroleum proved to be a more versatile energy source than coal, allowing for easier transportation and wider use across different types of vehicles. Recognizing oil's strategic importance, the U.S. Navy sought to secure reliable supplies from Mexico and the Caribbean. This dependency on foreign oil, however, was soon disrupted by German U-boat attacks during the war, which threatened supply routes. The crisis prompted a nationwide effort to increase domestic oil production. The U.S. government invested heavily in exploration and drilling, marking the beginning of America's deep involvement in the global petroleum industry. This period also highlighted the connection between oil and national security, leading to the establishment of the U.S. Navy's Bureau of Mines. In 1910, the Bureau played a crucial role in advancing oil extraction and refining technologies, ensuring the efficient transportation of oil over long distances through pipelines. As a result, by 1914, the United States was producing an astonishing 70% of the world's oil, solidifying its role as a dominant player in the global market. During World War I, U.S. oil production surged by nearly 50%, significantly contributing to the war effort. The war also underscored oil's strategic value, seen when the British Navy switched from coal to oil-powered ships, revolutionizing naval warfare. Following the war, the global oil landscape shifted dramatically. European powers, particularly Britain, the Netherlands, and France, began aggressively developing oil fields through major corporations such as Shell and British Petroleum. It became clear that oil was not just a commodity, but a geopolitical necessity. Meanwhile, the United States faced an internal transformation that would forever alter its relationship with oil. In 1919, a group of U.S. military personnel, including future President Dwight D. Eisenhower, embarked on an ambitious cross-country expedition to assess the nation's road infrastructure. The journey exposed the dire state of American roads, with travel speeds averaging a mere 5 miles per hour. Eisenhower realized that improving transportation was critical for national security and economic growth. This realization later led to the construction of the U.S. interstate highway system, further increasing the country's reliance on oil. As global industrialization accelerated, demand for oil skyrocketed, reinforcing the need for a steady supply. This led the U.S. to seek cheaper foreign oil sources. The real shift toward foreign oil dependence began in the late 1930s when Arabian nations started large-scale oil exploration and exports. The Middle East, long known for its vast oil reserves, had only recently begun tapping into its potential. In 1938, Saudi Arabia struck oil at the Dammam well, a discovery that would transform the region into a global energy hub. These oil-rich nations had several advantages. Not only did they possess massive reserves, but they could extract and refine oil at a much lower cost than other producers. Their strategic investments and geographic advantages allowed them to dominate the global oil market. However, having an abundant supply of oil wasn't enough. They needed a reliable market to sell it to. The industrial boom in the United States provided the perfect opportunity as demand for oil surged to fuel factories, automobiles, and military operations. As Middle Eastern oil producers gained prominence, they began amassing immense wealth from oil exports, but competition soon emerged. The Soviet Union started offering cheaper oil, challenging the dominance of Middle Eastern suppliers. This set the stage for a new era of geopolitical maneuvering as nations sought to secure stable energy supplies while maintaining economic and political leverage. The U.S., despite its growing domestic production, continued to rely on foreign oil for several reasons. First, Middle Eastern oil was cheaper to extract and import than American oil, making it a cost-effective choice for refineries and industries. Second, maintaining strong ties with oil-rich nations helped the U.S. exert geopolitical influence in strategically important regions by importing oil from allies like Saudi Arabia. The U.S. ensured cooperation on broader international issues, including security and trade. Additionally, the quality of crude oil varies depending on its source. U.S. refineries are designed to process specific types of crude oil, often requiring a mix of domestic and imported oil to optimize efficiency. This explains why the U.S. exports some of its own oil while simultaneously importing oil from other countries. Ultimately, America's oil paradox is shaped by a combination of historical, economic, and geopolitical factors. While the U.S. is the world's largest oil producer, it continues to import oil to maintain economic stability, strengthen international alliances, and optimize refinery operations. Understanding this intricate balance reveals the deeper complexities of global energy dependence and the ever-evolving role of oil in shaping the world's political landscape.